Hello everyone and welcome to my AOE Magicka Necromancer build. This is a very interesting Necromancer build and it's a very cool playstyle that I have actually never been able to do on any other class in this game. It is a 100% AOE focus build and it actually uses the pull armor to just pull people into your traps and get them killed by your AOEs. So yeah, really cool build. Not only does this build have a lot of damage, a lot of sustain, and a lot of healing, but it is also mobile too, and its kit is specifically designed to wipe groups of players. So I played this build on the PTS, and I of course just had, this was the only open world I got was versus these two guys here, but what makes this build so cool for me and what makes it really stand out is the fact that even in a one-on-one, you can use your AoEs effectively against a ranged opponent. So I think that this build is going to be absolutely fantastic for group PvP, fantastic for solo PvP as well. It's a very interesting style of build, and there you see the armor pull. We pull them right into all our traps. So I really hope that you guys enjoy checking this build out. This is, of course, a Lightning Staff, Frost Staff build. The block on the Frost Staff is so strong on this spec. With the heals over time that we have, look at the amount of healing power. We can easily tank out a lot of stuff with our Frost Staff, and that pull, man, it's such a unique playstyle that I've never been able to do before, and I really enjoyed this on the Necromancer. It was a lot of fun to play this style. So if you guys like this build, hit that like button. If you guys are new here, hit that subscribe button. I create regular ESO content, builds, 1vx commentaries, all kinds of good stuff. So I implore you guys to check it all out. And without further ado, let's take a look at that build, ladies and gentlemen. All right, guys. So let's take a look at this build. So to begin, I am a Breton on this spec. And I think Breton is the best race choice just kind of all around for a Magicka build. Now this is definitely a Magicka focus build, and Breton with the reduced cost, the regen, the max mag, absolutely fantastic, but you can go with other good Magicka races. High Elf's going to be a good choice, Dark Elf will work as well, even Khajiit can work for this build too. But I think Breton is pretty BIS for PvP, just light armor Magicka in general. Now taking a look at our stats, we've got all our points in Magicka, a whopping 39k Magicka, 25.8k health, and 15k stamina. So we've got a pretty decent mag pool. 39k is quite a bit to work with. That's super awesome. Our hit points at 25.8k is also great. If you guys want, you can push a little bit higher HP on this build, but Necromancer's heal over time is so strong. I really feel like this is plenty fine for hit points, even in light armor. We also have a Frost Staff for blocking, so that's something to take into account with our bulk on this spec too. And then our maximum stamina coming in at 15k is really nice for a Magicka build, yet again, because it allows us to use our stamina pool even though we're in a light armor robe spec. Now our regens on this build, I'm going to buff up with the potions, and I'm going to set the pets too. We've got 2,271 Magicka recovery, 1,300 stamina recovery, and just a little bit of health recovery. And this is due to the fact that we're a vampire. You don't need to be a vampire for this spec, but our regens will be a little bit higher in the mag and stam and a little lower in health because we are a vamp. Now the sustain on this build is really fantastic. We are not running tripods, so the base stamina sustain plus our big stamina pool is more than enough, and we also get stamina back from one of our abilities, so we got more than enough stam sustain on this build for sure, and the mag recovery is absolutely great at just about 2.3k, really nice. Now the spell damage on this build is coming in at 2,538 on 46% spell crit. Now this of course goes up by about 600 spell damage when we get our spinner's infused backstaff here, so that's going to bring us up to 3,100 to 3,200 spell damage on this build. So nice spell damage to pair with our 40k Magicka. We've got 20.5k spell and 18.5k physical resist with a whopping 3k critical resistance because we are in full impen on this spec. Now the resists on this build are not crazy high, but we do have the ice staff yet again, and that's going to play into our resists big time as well. If you look actually while we're on the ice staff bar, our resists go even higher to 20k physical and 22k spell. Now the one stat that we don't get to see on this build is the spell penetration, but we are rocking very high spell penetration on this build. If we look at our weapon, we've got a sharpened Spinner's Lightning Staff, so that's going to be 6,500 almost spell penetration from that. We are wearing light armor for another 5k penetration, so 11k, plus the breach buff is going to bring us up to 16k, and finally in our champion points, we have got our last 4k spell penetration. So this build is rocking 20k spell penetration, and that allows us to do a lot of damage. Now, that may be kind of overkill against some squishier builds, but for the most part, almost everybody in PvP has 20k plus spell resist when they're fully buffed. So this allows us to just cut through our opponent's resists and deal a lot of damage. Now, taking a look at the effects on this build, we are a vampire. Like I said, this is not a vampire build, so you don't need to be a vampire for it. It's up to you if you want to or not. Mine is just a vampire, so I kept it. Undeath in particular is kind of nice on the Necromancer because they use a lot of heal over time, so that's something worth mentioning, I think. And then we have got the Atronach Mundus. This is going to give us a bit of recovery. Now, this build has great sustain. If you feel like you want to drop the Atronach for even more damage, you can definitely go for the spell damage Mundus or even the penetration Mundus here if you like. And then finally, for the food, we are using the increase all primary stats. And yeah, I really like this food on the Necromancer because the Necromancer has so much regen just from having its pets out. It can afford to just drop the regen off the food, go for the max health, the max mag, and the max stam. And all of these are going to be very useful for this build in PvP. And then for the potions I'm using on this build, we are using the Essence of Spell Crit that give you both the Major Sorcery, the Spell Crit buff, and Return the Magicka. I, of course, have the Crown Store potions here, but you can always go and craft these yourself, and they'll be even better than the Crown Store potions. This is just what I had quick access to on the PTS. So let's take a look at the gear that we're using on this build. So the first set that we have is Slimecraw, and I picked Slimecraw just to bulk up all our outgoing damage. You can actually go for other sets here. Iceheart is a good option too. Any set that offers maybe some sort of AOE damage pressure that's good for a Magicka build. Even Scoria would be a good option, I think. You can go for as well. But I picked Slimecraw for that bonus crit and the minor Berserk buff. It's just going to increase all the damage that we do. So yeah, a really nice pick just from the perspective of a damage build. Now, the next set we have is Amber Plasm, and Amber Plasm plus our Necromancer sustain passive. This is so much sustain on this build. So we've got pretty much all the sustain in the world thanks to running Amber Plasm. A fantastic set. 250 Magicka stamina recovery on the 5-piece. That's 500 stat. There are very few sets in the game that give you that much. And then, of course, we get the Max Mag, Spell Crit, Spell Damage. All are great for our damage-focused build that we're running here. And then finally, we have got the Spinners as our last set in the jewelry and the weapons. Max Mag, Spell Damage, and that Penetration. Now, I actually went for Spinners because the healing power on this build is already really good. We've got great sustain, and I just wanted to pair in another damage set here. Now, this is a super AoE-focused build that you'll likely be using in either solo or Zerg combat against a lot of players. So a good option instead of Spinners would actually be Vicious Death. Now, Vicious Death, I say because we have so much AoE, and you can really bomb players on the Necro. The Necro has such a powerful AoE burst kit, and Vicious Death would pair really well on the front bar for this build. It's up to you what you guys want to go for here. Obviously, Spinners is going to allow you to hit a bit harder up front, but won't give you that big explosion if you get the kill. From my experience playing this build, the damage is really high. We probably don't even need Vicious Death to get a good bomb off, but it could definitely help for what this build is meant to do in PvP. Now, taking a look at the enchantments on our gear, on our Frost Staff on the back bar, we have got the Infused trait with the Weapon Spell Damage enchant. This is going to help bulk up your spell damage and just increase your overall outgoing damage. Now, if you really want, you can actually go for a Sturdy trait on the Frost Staff because it is a very good blocking weapon, but I think for the sake of burst, because this build is pretty damage focused, just to land that big AoE smack, I think that the infused weapon spell damage is the way to go here. And then on our front staff, we have got the Spinner's Lightning Staff sharpened with the shock damage enchant, and I like shock a lot because it's going to have a better chance of applying the minor vulnerability, which is such a fantastic debuff to increase your damage against opponents, and then the sharpened trait just for that increased damage as well. Now, taking a look at the jewelry, it is full arcane with spell damage. I tested this going for infused spell damage versus arcane spell damage. Arcane is a little bit less damage, but only by like 1%. So I think arcane is the better bet just for overall sustain. Plus, then you don't have to transmute your spinner's jewelry to the infused trait. And then for the gear, guys, we have got full impenetrable with maximum magicka on the gear. We get all the health and stamina that we need from the food buff we're running. So we just need max mag here, and we need, of course, that critical resistance. So let's take a look at the skills we're using on this build. And I'm actually going to start off on our Frost Staff, which is the back tank bar. for this build and the healing bar for the most part. The first skill we have here is the Blockade of Frost. This is going to be your snare for the build. It's a big AOE snare field, and if you have a chilled opponent in this field, they will become immobilized. This is really nice on the Necromancer because we have a frost field from the Unnerving Boneyard as well, so it's really easy for us to get that chilled effect if we have both fields together, which is super great. And then, of course, this is going to deal great damage every 1 second to your opponent as well. You're going to use this as kind of a hold. When opponents come towards you, you set down this field and they'll get snared in it, and you can use it to kind of hold a choke or hold a tight space where you can force the opponent to come into it. Now, the next ability we have is the Intensive Mender, and this is the primary heal for the build. This is such a good heal, guys. I mean, just look at this tooltip. 7.5k when we buff up on the Mender. Absolutely insane amounts of healing every 2 seconds. This counts as a pet as well, so having this up is going to give you your regen bonuses too. Really, really good heal for the Necromancer. Pretty much we can get away with almost just this heal by itself, but we are running 2 heals on this build just to add that tank ability that we'll need if we're going to be fighting multiple opponents. Now, taking a look at the next skill, we have got Race Against Time. Fantastic for the Necromancer. We're going to get that minor force buff, increasing our crit damage, and it gives us the Major Expedition for 4 seconds, as well as immunity to all snares and immobilizations for 4 seconds. This is going to ensure that we can stay mobile on our Necromancer. A big deal to have this skill, I think, on this build. And then the next ability we have is Hexproof. And Hexproof is here for that purge. It'll remove up to 4 negative effects from ourselves, and while slotted, the cost of all our abilities are also reduced by 3%. So it is nice for a little bit of sustain there too. But the thing I want to mention about Hexproof is that the purge costs health, and it pairs really well with strong heals over time. It allows you to essentially spam Hexproof because your heals over time will constantly heal away the health that you're using to use this ability. And something I really want to note is that especially in the non-champion campaign, where it's a lot more expensive to spam multiple purges in a row, Hexproof is going to be a very strong skill on the Necromancer. Now, the next ability we have is the Mortal Coil, and this requires a corpse on the ground, and you siphon the life from them to heal for 21k health over 12 seconds. If we buff up, this, of course, gets a little bit higher, 23k on the Mortal Coil. Really, really strong heal over time. Pairing that with our Intensive Mender, we have really insane heal over time on this build. Now, while siphoning the body, we also restore almost 3k stamina over the 12 seconds, and while this ability is slotted, our healing done is increased by 3%. Very important that we have this on our Frost Staff bar because you'll be doing a lot of blocking on this bar, and it allows you to just have a really strong amount of healing on your primary block bar. And the stamina return is a huge deal too. We already have great stamina sustain, but this stamina return comes when we're blocking as well on our front bar, which is the Lightning Staff. So because the stam sustain on this build is so good and we have such a big stam pool, you can get away with blocking with your Lightning Staff quite a lot on this build as well. So a really good defensive skill in general. Now, this Mortal Coil can be a little tricky to use because you do have to siphon a corpse on the ground. And as you guys can see here, it can be tough if you're moving around to get the siphon on the corpse for the full duration because, as you could see, we managed to line of sight our siphon there and break it. But the heal itself is very, very strong, and it's a really great way for Necromancer to hold their ground around the bodies that they've already laid down. And then for the ultimate on our back bar here, I have Temporal Guard. Now, this is an option for you guys. You can go with Temporal Guard if you're playing this solo. I think this is definitely the better ultimate if you're by yourself. The minor protection and the ability to teleport backwards, you can get away from stuff that would probably have killed you by using Temporal Guard. However, because this build has so much AOE and it is such a good build for group combat, I would recommend that if you're playing in a group, you run Animate Blast Bones. This will not only resurrect 3 dead allies on the ground, but you'll also consume corpses and summon 3 Blast Bones as well. The Blast Bones will all target and explode on something, and they deal a massive amount of damage. You actually get a higher amount of burst damage from Animate Blast Bones than you do from the Glacial Colossus ultimate. However, this requires you to have the bodies on the ground or the corpses on the ground, so there's a little bit of play involved in using this as well. But from a group perspective, this is definitely the best ability for the group combat. Now, this ability I think is very strong. I'm not sure how this is going to make it to the live server. I think that reviving 3 dead allies is maybe a bit overkill, but we'll have to wait and see. I wasn't really able to test this on the PTS because there is just not group combat going on. Now let's take a look at our front bar here, and this bar is our deadly AOE damage dealing bar. So the first ability we have is the Unnerving Boneyard, and look at the tooltip. 25k frost damage over 10 seconds, and it'll apply the Major Breach and Fracture. If we consume a corpse, we get a 20% damage bonus, bringing us up to nearly 30k damage on this tooltip here. Yeah, and your allies can, of course, activate the Grave Robber synergy, dealing a big burst of frost damage and healing us for the damage done. Really, really strong AoE field for the Necromancer. It pairs really well, like I said, with the Snare field off the Frost Staff. These two together will deal a lot of damage if someone stands in them. It is quite intense, the amount of damage it can deal. And of course, this ability can be casted at a distance, which is worth mentioning because you're able to set a bit of a combo at a distance, even with your AoE fields, thanks to the Unnerving Boneyard. Now, the next skill that we have is the Skeletal Arcanist. This is going to be another pet for you that will definitely give you your regen bonuses as well. But the reason I went with Skeletal Arcanist is because it shoots an AoE shock attack. Shock, of course, can apply minor vulnerability, which is very, very great for a burst build. But the fact that it's an AoE and it goes every 2 seconds, it just allows us to have more AoE pressure on this build. Namely, the fact that we can set the pet early before we even go to drop our AoE fields. So it's going to actively deal damage on top of the fields that we've already created. 2,800 shock damage every 2 seconds. It's not as high damage as our ground-based fields, but it definitely adds up on top of everything else. Now, the next skill that we have is the Remote Totem, and this is a really fantastic skill for an AoE Necromancer. It is going to be an AoE Fear. After 2 seconds, the totem will instill fear, holding enemies in place for 4 seconds. So you have to wait for this ability to cast, but due to the nature of this being a very AoE-focused build, you are able to use this as people kind of get trapped in your fields, and especially in World PvP, this will allow you to really lock out large areas of a fight and force your opponent to either take the stun or retreat into a bad position. So I really, really like this stun for that reason. Now, I'd use this stun while we were doing one-on-one duels. It is not the best stun for one-on-one duels. Unless you're fighting a melee-oriented build, then it is a really good stun. So it has its hits and misses, but for the sake of what this build is supposed to do, this is going to be the best stun that you can use. It'll also give you minor protection, which is great, giving you a little bit more bulk as well. So that's good too. And then for the next ability, we of course have the Stalking Blast Bones. We're going to buff up so you can see 15k tooltip with 20k penetration. You will hit very hard Blast Bones on this build. And of course, the further the skeleton has to travel, it can deal up to 50% more damage. Really, really strong skill. Now, something I want to mention about the Blast Bones is that I don't think that this ability will stay as strong as it is going into the live server of Elsweyr. On the PTS, it is very, very good. But I think it's worth mentioning that we will likely see a nerf on Blast Bones for the Necromancer. And namely in that additional damage bonus that it does, we'll probably see that go down to 30 or 40% additional damage. And then the next ability we have is the Beckoning Armor. And this is honestly the skill that makes this work on the Necromancer. You could play a build like this on other classes, but it wouldn't work quite as well. But Beckoning Armor makes this build really, really good. It gives us our armor bonuses, and it will pull enemies into us every 3 seconds if they strike us with a ranged attack. That is so valuable. So it allows us to set all our fields down like so, and then what we can do is just go for our armor, and when the opponent attacks us, they actually get pulled into our fields. So we can do some really great counterplay against a ranged opponent, which is typically what an AoE build would be very weak against because they can't lock down the ranged opponent in their AoE. Really, really unique skill for the Necromancer. Yet again, I don't think this ability will make it to live the way it is. I think the 3-second cooldown on the pull is a bit much, so we'll probably see an increase on that cooldown, but holy man, you guys will see in the footage just how well the Beckoning Armor brings this build together. And then finally, guys, we have got the Glacial Colossus for our ultimate. And yeah, this is our burst ultimate. When we lay down the fields, we throw the Colossus on top. Major vulnerability and an 11k tooltip per smash. We buff up with the potion, a 12.3k tooltip per smash, and the final smash will stun opponents for 4 seconds. Really, really strong ultimate. If you manage to catch a group of players in this, it will most likely definitely kill them, especially if they're already in your fields. A lot of damage coming out of this ultimate. You mix the Blast Bones in there. oh my god, this is a lot of AoE pressure on the build. So I hope you guys noticed right off the bat that this entire build is running nothing but AoEs, which is exactly what I wanted for it, because I wanted it to be more of that AoE-focused Necromancer for World PvP. And the last little thing I want to mention about our front bar here is our Death Knell passive. We get a 40% crit bonus versus an opponent below 25% HP on our front bar. That is really high. I mean, we've got a base of 46.6% crit, so we've got 86.6% crit when our opponent is in execute range. And yeah, it pretty much allows all of our fields and AoEs and ultimate to semi-function as an execute, having that almost guaranteed crit rate. Alright, so let's take a look at the champion points we're using on this build. So starting off in the tower tree, we've got 34 Warlord, 19 Sprinter, and 0 Bashing Focus. We don't need to bash because we're running the dual staff, of course. Warlord and Sprinter, so important for PvP. We got to reduce the cost of break free, and we're going to have to sprint in PvP. So very valuable points to put there for World. And then in the Lover tree, we've got 56 Mooncalf, 56 Arcanist, 7 Tenacity, and 2 in Healthy. Now, I am a Vampire, so that's why I've got no points in Healthy here. If you guys are not a Vampire, you could put a few more points in there instead of Tenacity if you want. But the Arcanist and the Mooncalf focus, very important to give us both the Stamina, Magicka, Sustain we need for the build. And then the Windrunning passive is also really nice too. The increased movement speed and the increased recovery while sprinting is valuable for sure. Now, taking a look at the Shadow Tree, we've got 56 Tumbling and 40 in Shadow Ward. We could actually put a few more points in Shadow Ward because the block on this build is so strong, but having a fairly equal spread here is great because we have to roll dodge and we have to block in PvP. This build has enough Stam Sustain to do a lot of both. And then, of course, our Ice Staff will require Magicka to block, so we actually have a very, very strong block on our Ice Staff bar. Now, taking a look at the Apprentice Tree, we have got a nice even spread here for a Burst Tree. 49 Elemental, 50 Spell Erosion, and 51 in Elfborn. So we focus on everything, the crit damage, the base damage, and the increase in penetration, all super valuable for this spec. The important passive we get, of course, is Spell Precision, and Arcane Well can be nice for the sustain, but in PvP, it doesn't have the biggest impact for the most part. Now, taking a look at the Atronach tree, we've got 81 Master at Arm and 39 Staff Expert. A lot of our attacks count as direct damage because AoEs, for the most part, are direct damage. So we get a lot of damage bonus out of the Master at Arms. And then the Staff Expert is also very important because we use that Lightning Staff heavy attack to apply more AoE pressure as well. So that's going to help out with that too. Now, we do get the Tactician passive, roll dodge to set an opponent off balance. This is actually pretty nice because we don't have a stun outside of the totem or the pull from the bones. So if we dodge an enemy attack, we can actually stun them with a partially or fully charged heavy attack on our staff bar, thanks to this Tactician passive as well. And then another passive I wanted to mention was the Butcher for the increased light and heavy attack damage against an opponent below 25% health. Oftentimes, you will be using your Lightning Staff heavy with the very high crit rate to finish off a low health rolling opponent, so the Butcher is going to help you out with that as well. In the Ritual Tree, we of course have nothing. I didn't put any points in Thaum because the only thing that would have been affected by Thaum is the Graveyard, and outside of that, all our other skills would not get bonuses from this, so I omitted this tree entirely. Now, going into the Steed Tree, we've got 56 Ironclad and 52 Resistant. We gotta soak up incoming direct damage and incoming crits. A lot of enemy damage and burst is that in PvP, so very important that we focus on those. 17 in Spell Shield. This is because I am, of course, a Breton. A Breton does not need to have super high spell resist because they do get that innate spell resist passive. And then in the Lady Tree, we've got the 42 Light Armor Focus. A lot of points here because we don't get that physical resist bonus from Breton like we do the spell resist. Now, taking a look at the Hardy and Elemental Defender, we have an even 32-32 spread. Reduce the incoming damage from physical and magical attacks. Very important, I think. And then nothing in Thick Skin because we have Hexproof. Hexproof is a really fantastic purge. Mixed with the two really strong heals over time we have, yeah, you should not be getting hit by dots on this build. You should be able to purge them right away. No worries at all. And then in the Lord Tree, guys, we have got 37 in Quick Recovery to increase the healing we receive by 9%. And that is the build, ladies and gentlemen. All right, guys, so let's jump into that PvP commentary. Like I said, there is not a lot of people to fight on the PTS, so I did do a damage test to see what kind of AoE burst we can get on this build. We set the fields down, we go for the ultimate, and just look at this smash. Oh my god. Absolutely insane AoE damage. But we are going to be dueling on the PTS for the most part because that is the only fights that I could get. So our first fight here is against another Magicka Necromancer, and we're actually going to set our fields down and try to use our armor pull to pull him into us. There he goes for the attack, and I actually threw my field down in the wrong spot on top of him, but that's okay. Using that Frost Staff block to mitigate a lot of damage from the opposing Blast Bones. We can block the enemy Blast Bones and take a lot less damage from it, but just look at the heals over time on this build. If you just look at the incoming burst that we take and how quickly we're able to heal it away, you can really see the healing power of the two tethers working together. Here, actually, we get caught with only one heal, so we only have the Mender up, but we managed to get the tether there, and our hit points just shoot right back up. And yeah, the playstyle of this build is pretty interesting. It's all about kind of holding your own ground. I go for my ultimate as he's sitting inside of my AoE fields. We do a massive amount of damage to him there, but he manages to roll out, and we just reset our fields, get the pull with the armor yet again, and we're just going to continue to stay in our AoEs. Now, the playstyle of this build is fairly interesting because you do a lot of camping inside your own AoEs, and the Necromancer armor that pulls people really benefits from it. I mean, even if an enemy sniper came wandering by, they'd get pulled right into all of this stuff here, and I think that's really worth mentioning. Now, something else that's going on in this fight is we have both the heals over time that I'm trying my best to constantly cycle. I'm sorry if I let my heals go down. I am still learning this very strange build to play, but we get to use those strong heal over times with the hex-proof ability, and hexproof plus the heals over time allows us to just have a really good tank on this build. And as you guys can see, every time he has the incoming burst, our hit points just shoot right back up. We hexproof to remove the negative effects, and we're going to reset our fields and our blast bones on this guy here. Now, I think on this build I should definitely be channeling blast bones at this guy more often. I don't resummon my blast bones as often as I should, but there you see we actually get a great smack on him there, almost bringing him down. But I'm just going to go for the reset on the Mender, reset my mage as well, set my tether down, set my armor as well, and then we're going to throw the AoEs after we pull him in yet again with the armor. And I cannot stress enough how much the armor really helps with this build. It does really make a difference because we couldn't camp the AoEs if we didn't have that pull off the armor. And as you guys can see, he keeps setting up more blast bones. I cannot kill his blast bones in time, so close to finishing it off there, but we're just going to continue to use our block, use our armor buff, and use our heals to tank this guy out. Now, something I do want to note as well is that he's playing a single target oriented Magicka Necro. So he's got the single target kit, and we've got a purely AoE kit, and we can actually keep up to par with his build, and I think that's quite incredible for the Necromancer and just reflects how powerful their AoE kit really is. And as you can see there, we're doing a good job with the Frost Staff, blocking those incoming attacks. I need to reset my armor buff here if we want to get the pull on this guy, and I'm just not doing it. I'm sorry. Such an amateur on this build, but I had a lot of fun playing it. Just took me a bit of time to get it down. Here we see he goes for the totem. We actually jump into the totem just a little bit too soon there. I was hoping that the fear would have gone by already. Get a good smack from his blast bones there. We just go for the hold block into both our heals, and look at how easy it is for us to stay alive, how easy it is for us to stay full resource. The sustain on this build is absolutely incredible. We are not challenged for resource at all during the course of this. I set down the Colossus. We get a huge smack, and he ends up rolling back into it, and down he goes. A fantastic fight against that guy there. I went pretty back and forth with him, about 50-50 today, so it was nice fighting with him. Now, I also have a clip against a Stamina Nightblade here, and this build against the Stamina Nightblade, man, all I can really say is you are really able to shut down his ability to jump on top of you, because if the Stamblade wants to attack, he is forced into your AoE fields. Now, the build that I'm fighting against here does not use any ranged attacks, so we don't actually get the pull with the armor on him here, and you're going to see me go for the fear occasionally to try to get the stun with the fear on him. But there you see we get the off balance into the heavy attack on the stun, and I drop my ultimate right away, but he rolls out of it. Really great play on his part, and we're just going to reset our fields, reset our tether, reset our Mender, and we're going to continue to fight this guy. He jumps on top with the ambush, and we're just going to channel some heavy attacks on him. I really should be sending out out more blast bones against him yet again. I am a bit of an amateur on the Necromancer, so I apologize for that, guys. But we're going to continue to fight this guy, and he's just going to lay on that Nightblade pressure, and as long as we keep our heals up and our fields down, he's going to have a very hard time engaging, because he will be able to do a bit of damage, but anything past that, he has to retreat out of the fields because it is too much pressure. And of course, if he was using a bow, it would be even easier for us to pull him into our trap here. And against the Nightblade, he's running quite a few damage over time. He's got the poisons on, he's got the Scoria, so the Hexproof is going to be a fantastic ability to help shut him down. There you see we nearly finish him off. He manages to get that really clutch cloak, and we start sending the Blast Bones out against him. And I think I start doing a much better job with the Blast Bones as this fight goes on. And as you can see, we'll just reset our fields, reset our heals, and then we're going to go and open on him with Blast Bones. A nice smack there. He goes into the jump on top of us. I respond with my ultimate, and we get him with the Blast Bones and bring him down. A fantastic spike yet again. So that is all of the people that I was honestly able to fight on the PTS. All of 2 people were out here dueling against me, so I enjoyed the fights against them. Really great fights to you guys. If you guys like this build and you like this video, hit that like button. If you guys are new here, hit that subscribe button. I create regular ESO content, and I've been spending a lot of time on the Necromancer, putting together Necromancer builds, so I hope that you guys enjoyed the build that you saw here, and I hope you're looking forward to more Necromancer in the future. If you guys are interested in checking out some live gameplay on Twitch, you can of course check that out in the description in the link below. And finally, we are sponsored by What the Fast. They're a VPN for gamers, and they give me better ping to ESO, and they're free to try for the first 15 days. So that is all that I have for you guys. Thank you again so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you again next time.